And with the first presidential debate this evening, we wanted to get perspective from across the country on topics that will be discussed by the candidates. And for this conversation, we're joined by Fox 5's Tom Fitzgerald out of Washington, D.C., Claire Sims from Fox 5 Atlanta, and Mike Flannery with FLD in Fox 32 in Chicago. But Tom, let's begin with you. What is the feel in D.C. and on Capitol Hill ahead of tonight's debate? What are your sources saying?
Well, you know, on two levels, on a local level and a national level. Look, politics, you know, is the local sport here in Washington. But because of the coronavirus pandemic, we're not going to see the usual things we see in this city. There's not going to be any big bars having watch parties. There's not going to be big gatherings of partisans like we see every 4 years when debate time rolls around. That's history this year. But, you know, that's the spectator sport of this. You know, the real, you know, nuts and bolts part of this is that Donald Trump, as he enters this debate tonight, is now saddled with this story that has taken over this city tonight. This story out of the New York Times alleging that the president only paid, you know, federal income taxes 2 of the last 15 years. It has completely washed over the news cycle here, and all eyes right now are on the president to how not only he talks about this when he's asked about it, and we're expecting he is going to be asked about it, but also how Joe Biden deals with this, because Joe Biden has been trying for days now to keep the focus on healthcare, keep the focus on COVID-19 and the coronavirus pandemic. Then we were met with the death of Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg, then the news cycle over her replacement on the court, according to the president, Amy Coney Barrett. Now this is just yet another thing that pushes Joe Biden away from that goal of keeping all eyes on the coronavirus pandemic.
That's right. Now, Fox News' our own Chris Wallace will moderate tonight. And last week, he released the 6 topics the candidates will cover. And just for our viewers, they are Trump and Biden's records, the Supreme Court, coronavirus, the COVID-19 pandemic, the economy, race and violence in our cities, and the integrity of the election. Now, Claire, Joe Biden's record is something that President Trump has been targeting for a while, and we hear it a lot at the president's rallies. He says Joe Biden has 47 years of experience compared with the president's 47 months. Now, is that something you expect will continue tonight?
Well, absolutely. It would not be a debate if they didn't go after each other. And of course, the big difference here, though, is going to be the flavor of that. So President Trump has long touted himself as a political outsider. He is a political outsider. He never ran for office until that 2016 presidential run. But he used that outsider status to really break through that huge number of Republican candidates we saw in 2016. And I think the playbook is going to be very similar. Those were people with political backgrounds. Joe Biden, as you mentioned, 47 years in the political sphere. So the president is really going to use that to his advantage to sort of differentiate himself. And it's something that we saw once he was whittled down to the Republican nominee back in 2016. It really worked to his advantage against Hillary Clinton. He not only went after her record, but also her husband's record, former President Bill Clinton.
That's right, Claire. Now, Mike, the former Vice President Joe Biden has been attacking the president's record on the coronavirus. But where else can we see Biden attack Trump tonight?
Well, I think, as Tom said, those income taxes open up a huge number of opportunities for Biden to attack. I will say, I think, though, that the president in the weeks leading up to this has made a tactical error. He has effectively lowered the bar for Biden's performance here, labeling him Sleepy Joe. Many of the president's allies have suggested that Joe Biden doesn't even know what century it is, that he's not going to be. So it reminds me of a long ago mayoral election here in Chicago where the opposition held rallies and they would chant "Dum Dum Daley" about Rich Daley, and the first time he ran for mayor back in the 1980s. So came the debate. All Daley had to do was form a few English language sentences, offer some thoughtful proposals, and people were like, well, wait a minute, he's not a dumbo. I think the president may live to regret some of that setup for this debate. But I do think that Biden, for the first time, we know with Chris Wallace, he's going to face aggressive questioning. There will be follow-up questions. I'm not sure that we've seen Biden in that kind of sustained forum. This is going to go on for quite a while. There's going to be some back and forth. And we'll see just how well Biden measures up.
That's right, Mike. We haven't seen former Vice President Joe Biden sit for many interviews with very, very skilled inquisitors like our own Chris Wallace. He's been trying to get an interview with the former vice president. But let's switch gears here. I mean, Tom mentioned this earlier. The Supreme Court has just been on the top of the mind of everyone since the passing of Justice Ginsburg. And President Trump just this past weekend nominated Judge Amy Coney Barrett to fill her seat on the High Court. How often do you think that'll be brought up tonight? And what is it resonating with voters, Democrats and Republicans? Do you think it'll drive turnout as well?
Well, we know it will be brought up. It's one of the subjects that Chris Wallace has already announced that will be part of the 6 that he is going to be talking about. If I can just add one thing to the end of what Mike said there, because he's absolutely right about what President Trump publicly has been saying about his opponent in these debates, Joe Biden. However, there's a subtext going on here, which we've heard over the last couple of days, Mike, from the Trump campaign. And what they're saying is quite a contrast with what the president's been saying. They've been saying, well, you know, Joe Biden, he was in the world's greatest deliberative body for decades. He's a skilled debater. He's an experienced debater. And they also have been pointing out his performance against Paul Ryan and Sarah Palin in his previous vice presidential debate. So it's a very interesting contrast. Mike's absolutely right. The president's been taking at length to say, you know, these things about Sleepy Joe. But privately, we're hearing from the Trump campaign itself, though, that they are taking Joe Biden a lot more seriously than the president's public statements would suggest. On the Supreme Court, look, the Democrats know, they know that the Republicans have the votes to pass this nominee. Even though the Democrats are saying they will fight this, they will oppose this, at the end of the day, Lindsey Graham has already said he's calling this hearing of the Senate Judiciary Committee on October 12th. He will send this nomination to the full committee by October 22nd, and he expects the Senate to vote on this by the end of next month. That much we know. What we don't know quite yet, though, is where Joe Biden stands on this issue of packing the court. A lot of Democrats have been talking about this possibility of expanding the number of justices on the U.S. Supreme Court. Now, it's happened before, not since the 1800s, but it would be a radical shift for the legislative makeup to suddenly start putting more justices on the court based upon which political party happens to hold sway over the White House and the Senate at the same time. So expect that to be one of the questions that we're going to hear. Is Joe Biden in favor of packing the U.S. Supreme Court and adding more justices that see things the way he does?
Tom, that's right, and we've heard from...
Joe Biden wants to duck. He doesn't want to answer that stuff, and I think, you know, Amy Coney Barrett, she's on the U.S. Court of Appeals based here in Chicago. I mean, even people who don't like her political point of view acknowledge her brilliance, acknowledge the warmth, the sense of humor that she displays. I think, you know, in this upcoming Senate hearing, we're going to see a lot of that. I don't think Biden wants to get on the wrong side of that. And this issue of her conservative Catholicism, her being a Roman Catholic, she graduated the Notre Dame University Law School just a few miles from here. She taught there for 15 years. I don't think Biden wants to get on the wrong side of that either. I'll be real interested to see, and Chris Wallace is going to have to follow up with several questions on all of this stuff to try to nail Biden down. He's trying to duck it because he doesn't want to offend the left wing of the Democratic Party.
And Claire, just to bring up, you know, Obamacare arguments in front of the Supreme Court start November 10th. And the Biden campaign is really hitting that hard, telling their base, their voters, hey, look, your health care is at risk if Judge Coney Barrett is going to be on the court, and that'll obviously be brought up tonight.
Oh, definitely. I actually talked to our Attorney General here in Georgia. He's one of the Attorney Generals who signed on to that lawsuit and is very interested in Judge Barrett becoming the next Supreme Court Justice for the United States, because he knows that that is going to be heard shortly after the election. And that's one of the reasons why Republicans here in Georgia say, well, we absolutely have to confirm someone as quickly as possible. That is definitely in the back of their minds, that they would have this conservative majority on the court. And I know in the past from doing research on Judge Barrett that she has said some negative things about the Affordable Care Act. And so I think they feel like she would be on their side. Although we've also heard a lot of people who say, she's really a prudent student of the law and will do what the law dictates, and may not be just as blanket a blanket conservative vote on the court, as you might suspect.
And Claire, just speaking again about healthcare, we're in the midst still of the pandemic. Nearly 1 million people have died worldwide, including more than 200,000 here at home. But President Trump's response to the virus has been something Biden has hammered since early March. And President Trump maintains, he closed the border to China. He got states ventilators in time, Operation Warp Speed with vaccine progress. Will tonight's debate primarily focus on the coronavirus pandemic?
So debate watchers I've talked to have said that if former Vice President Biden can keep the debate centering around COVID-19 and the coronavirus response, that it's going to be a win for him. Every Democratic candidate on the ballot here in Georgia has been hammering the COVID-19 pandemic and what they see as a lack of response from the federal government. And here in Georgia, that has really trickled down to our governor. Governor Brian Kemp is a staunch Trump conservative. The president's endorsement helped get him sort of over the hump when he was in a runoff with a fellow Republican candidate. And so he has really been walking a very fine line, making sure that he is in line with what the president has been saying about COVID-19. And despite calls from a lot of people here in Georgia to mandate masks, he's never done so. So I think Democrats really want the failure or what they describe as a failure of leadership from the Oval Office to be a central point here, a central issue in November. They see it as a winning issue. And it also goes hand in hand with what we were talking about just a few minutes ago, the Affordable Care Act. There are a lot of people here in Georgia who are concerned about coverage for pre-existing conditions. We have ads here in Georgia running saying, keep in mind, COVID-19 is a pre-existing condition, and we had a spike not too long ago. And so there are a lot of Georgians who are concerned about that. And I think it will be a big issue as we move forward.
And obviously, the coronavirus pandemic has affected the economy as well. Building the economy was one of President Trump's platform promises in 2016. Pre-pandemic, the unemployment rate was at 3%. Now it's almost at 8%, I think 8.4 is the latest number. His base felt he delivered on that promise. But Mike, is this a spot where the president can shine and tout his record, or have the past 6 months kind of put too much of a damper on that and blown that part of his administration out of the water?
I think the polling shows that it really is in the eye of the beholder here. I think if for those who are in the president's base, those glory days of 3% and change unemployment are what to point to, and that's where the president promises to get us back to. For those who are not admirers of the president, though, the unemployment, the coronavirus. I mean, as Claire has been pointing out, and Tom has said, I mean, we'll see how skillful Joe Biden is in making these connections. The messaging of Democrats out here in the Midwest in the past week or two, and certainly since the death of Ruth Bader Ginsburg, has been all about health care, COVID, Obamacare, the court, that case that comes up just a few days, the court will hear just a few days after the November 3rd election. All of that is linked. And the economy, they don't talk about that so much.
And we just want to bring Tom in here, too, as well. You know, Congress has yet, if at all, to pass another round of coronavirus relief. But we want to bring in also the New York Times report about the president's tax records as well that you mentioned earlier. You know, if they're seeing the president that they support, you know, not paying any federal income tax for the last 10 years, what does that say about his message on the economy?
Well, look, the president has a base of about 40% of the electorate that is going to be with him no matter what. So what's at stake in this debate for both of these candidates is to talk to that middle ground, to those blue-collar independents who have, you know, not made up their mind about this race. The danger for the president here is that when he gets in forums like this, he does tend to talk to his base. One of the skills he's going to have to put on display in this debate is the ability to branch out, to go to the undecided. Look, it's, you know, late September here. People who are probably going to vote for Donald Trump are probably going to vote for Donald Trump no matter what he does in this debate. Likewise with Joe Biden. But there is a pool of voters out there that have still not made up their minds. And this first debate is the most critical of them all, because by the second, third debates, they may have already made up their minds. This news on the taxes, there's no way to shake this out. This is not good news for the president. But to Mike's point, you know, as we look at the economy right now, there are so many drivers of people's fears, worries, and concerns right now that to go back out there and start talking about the good times of 2016 might seem woefully out of step with where people's heads are right now. And on top of all of that, we haven't gotten to it, but, you know, we have a severe issue with race relations in this country right now. That's also going to be one of Chris Wallace's topics, and that is tied in to all of this as well as to how these candidates shape moving forward from this point, not just recounting what we've all already experienced in 2020.
Now, Tom, as you just mentioned, obviously...
And I want to jump in real quick,
Sure,
if
Claire.
I may.
Go ahead. Yeah.
Well, so we're talking about those undecided voters, and polling shows us that there really are a small number of people who are undecided. And those are the ones who really ultimately will make the decision, put one candidate over the top. But I was talking this morning to a Emory University debate expert, and his name's Dr. Ed Lee here in Atlanta. And what he mentioned that I thought was so smart was it's not about the undecided voters, it's about the unengaged voters, the disengaged voters who don't turn out. Those are the ones who President Obama was able to get to turn out for him in 2008 and in 2012. Those are the ones that they really need to be reaching out to. And I think something like Trump's taxes or COVID-19 or losing your job because of COVID-19, those are the things that really put people over the top and make them want to go to the polls. And like you said, this first debate is so critical because here in Georgia, the registration deadline for November is October 5th. So this debate is going to determine whether somebody is inspired enough to go and register to vote and able to cast a ballot in November. So I think that's really critical.
That's right, Claire. And just to bring up polling, wanted to tell our viewers the Real Clear Politics polling average for this week has Biden up by 6%. And some Fox News polls that were just released over the weekend, too, has Biden up in states like Ohio, Pennsylvania, and Nevada. Want to switch gears here again to something Tom alluded to. You know, now in 2020, President Trump has been running all summer on this platform of law and order amid the social unrest happening in the wake of the death of George Floyd in May. Protests and some riots across this country, especially in Chicago, in the wake of killings by police of people of color. Mike, will this platform resonate? And is this a spot where the president can shine in the debate? He's tied former Vice President Biden, you know, his supporters are just like Antifa. He's said that multiple times. Mike, what do you think of that?
Well, Chicago is a city, while the whole political apparatus here and across the state of the down in the state capital, Springfield, is Democratic and opposed to Trump. The help that Bill Barr offered in terms of several hundred, I think it was 300 additional FBI, ATF, DEA agents, etc., and some people from Homeland Security, the mayor here did accept, unlike in Portland, unlike in other cities. And Bill Barr came and was bragging about some of the decline in the violence that has resulted since those hundreds of federal agents in Chicago. So, look, that is a huge issue here. That is something on which, unlike in other parts of the country, the Democrats here are willing to take help. Jeff Sessions, in the first year, in 2017, when he was the Attorney General, he came out here and was greeted by a number of the local political yokels who were thrilled that he was sending additional FBI and ATF agents at that time. So yeah, that has some appeal here. But as 538.com ranks the state of Illinois, there is a less than 1% chance of Donald Trump carrying Illinois. So I don't think it's going to turn things around for him here.
And Claire and Tom, feel free to jump in. Obviously, you both live in cities that have been racked by these protests this summer. And like I said before, the president and his campaign are trying to tie Biden to these Antifa protesters and these rioters throughout the summer. But is it sticking, and has Biden done enough to denounce it?
Well, now I'll jump in here. Joe Biden has been painfully shy of press conferences throughout this entire summer. Yes, there's a COVID-19 pandemic that's been going on, which has limited his travel. But, the access to candidate Joe Biden has been slim. He comes out and he makes statements at somewhat irregular intervals. We heard from him last night briefly about the tax situation. But no, we do not get a steady, full-throated statement from Joe Biden on this. I suspect it's one of the things that he is going to be pressed on in this debate. Not only his reaction to all this, but what do you do about it? What are you going to do about race relations in this country? What are you going to do about the relationships between police departments, law enforcement agencies, and the communities which they are sworn to protect and serve? So, again, it's not just identifying the problem. When you get on that debate stage, you have to tell the American people what you're going to do about that problem. And, as of yet, Joe Biden has not gotten out there forcefully to denounce some of the more radical, violent elements that we have seen in these demonstrations. Washington, D.C., we were a city that, had federal troops literally spill out onto Lafayette Square here and dispense crowd control and tear gas measures to clear a crowd. That was one of the most remarkable things a lot of people who lived in this city say they'd ever seen in their lives. So this is going to be front and center, right up there with everything else we've already talked about. Give you the Supreme Court, give you the economy, give it COVID-19, but the state of civil rights, social justice, and policing in this country, that's going to be right up there.
And just finally, the last topic, the integrity of the election will also be discussed. President Trump has been casting doubt for months now, claiming the election will be fixed because of mail-in ballots. And you're seeing more people than ever are choosing to send their ballot via mail this time because of the pandemic. Claire, do you expect the president to keep up this line of reasoning, and how can Joe Biden push back on it?
Well, I absolutely think the president is going to continue. It's something that has really sort of taken a little bit of a hold here in Georgia. We had over 1.5 million people request absentee ballots for our June primary. And for context, our presidential preference primary was supposed to be in March. It got pushed back and combined with our May primary for the other races, and then that again got pushed back until June. And the Secretary of State here in Georgia, who is a Republican, actually sent absentee by mail request forms to every active voter in the state ahead of the June primary because of concerns about safety and going to the polls in person. Now, he's not doing that for the November election, but we have had a lot of outside groups that are sending out absentee ballot request forms. There's a lot of voter education going on. There are a lot of people who are going to cast their ballots by mail. Now, I do want to make a quick distinction. Here in Georgia, we don't have what is commonly referred to as mail-in voting. You actually have to ask for a ballot. That is how our Republican Secretary of State says that we have some safeguards in place versus states like California where they mail out a live ballot to registered voters. So here in Georgia, at least, I know our Republican Secretary of State and our elections boards that are both Republican and Democrat are really heavily pushing absentee by mail voting, and they say that fraud is very limited. They did in Georgia create a task force to look into potential fraud, and they said there were about 1,000 ballots that they're looking into from the June primary, but when you consider hundreds of thousands of votes that were cast, it's really a tiny percentage, and again, those are not confirmed, those are just ballots that they're reviewing.
All right, and we just want to get the final thoughts of all of you. Obviously, this debate was supposed to be at the University of Notre Dame tonight, but it's taking place in Cleveland on the campus of the Cleveland Clinic. Tom, your final thoughts. What are you going to be looking for? Who do you see coming out ahead following the debate tonight?
Well, you know, the one thing I think I'm going to be looking for, which we have not talked as much about here, is how is Joe Biden going to deal with Donald Trump when Donald Trump does his Donald Trump thing and goes after Joe Biden like Joe Biden has not seen yet throughout any of those numerous Democratic primary campaign debates that we saw. Donald Trump is known for being tough. He throws everything, including the kitchen sink, at anybody who's standing at the opposing podium from it. We saw it when he was running for president in 2016 against those other Republicans. You know, we saw it against Hillary Clinton 4 years ago. Joe Biden has to make a calculated decision. How much does he engage the president in those kinds of tactics? How much of his time does he use? Because remember, this is all on the clock. How much time does he devote to fact checking what the president says? And is he able to rapid fire respond to the president in the ways that the president is able to level these attacks as he has done so quickly and so often? It's a completely different kind of strategy that Joe Biden is going to have to bring into this debate than any of the previous ones that he'd faced against traditional political opponents.
And Mike, you know, the president has said numerous times that just being president is debate prep in and of itself. There's been reporting that Rudy Giuliani and Chris Christie are playing Biden in the debate prep. What are your thoughts for tonight, Mike?
I think Tom is spot on. I would say that it's 4 years later, though. And I'm not sure that the president, saddled with this record, some good, some not so good, is going to be able to do what he did 4 years ago, and perhaps even what he's done from the White House press room podium on occasion. I think that the Biden people are already signaling that they're going to let a lot of this just kind of be Donald Trump noise, and they're going to focus on COVID. They're going to focus on the Affordable Care Act. They're going to focus, I think, too, on this tax issue. And again, here in the Midwest, those non-college educated, white, blue-collar voters just north of us in Wisconsin, across the big lake in Michigan, in Pennsylvania. I think that this tax return story, these revelations in the New York Times, open up a whole series of counterattacks that Joe Biden can launch into, aimed squarely at those white, blue-collar voters who are the core of Donald Trump's support. And in those states, I mean, he carried Michigan by less than 11,000 votes. They don't have to pick off very many. He carried Wisconsin by just a few more votes than that. Again, they don't have to pick off very many of those people for Joe Biden to win those critical states. And the other thing that I'm looking for, as I said earlier, is for Joe Biden to get a thorough cross-examination by Chris Wallace. Let's see how he stands up, especially on issues where these two men have sharp differences on divisive wedge issues like systemic racism. Joe Biden has said repeatedly it's going to be one of the things he focuses on as president. It's one of the things that a Democratic House and Senate, if that were to be the case, would focus on. Donald Trump says it doesn't exist. There is no systemic racism. I think this is a debate well worth watching, folks.
And that's right, Claire, like Mike said, this will be obviously must-see TV. It's the first matchup between the two. And, you know, Joe Biden and Donald Trump, they're both in their late 70s. Joe Biden, if elected, would be the oldest person to hold the office of the presidency. But, Claire, what are you looking for tonight?
I think you guys all have mentioned really great things, but one of the things, I'm going to bring up Dr. Lee again with Emory University here in Atlanta. One of the things he mentioned is we are in such a social media world that obviously people are going to be watching that 90 minutes, and I think the ratings are going to be probably pretty high. But it's what resonates the next day on Twitter and Facebook and Instagram, wherever else these candidates may be. It's those little sort of moments that where they really land a good point or whatever the case may be with these two, we'll find out. But I think those things that people are still talking about on Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and even into the weekend, those are the real moments I think we're going to be looking for.
Yeah, Claire, I mean, that's a great point. For those of voters who don't watch this every day like us, we'll see how much of this sticks with them in the first debate. Claire Sims, Mike Flannery, and Tom Fitzgerald, three of the top political reporters from across the country. Thank you so much for your time, and we'll have to wait and see what happens in tonight's debate. Thank you.